Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, as we join from all parts of the world. It's a pleasure to be here with you. You have come, and we have come to discuss a collective mission for big change in education and how in places across the world, we might achieve remarkable systems change on behalf of our young people, their educators, and their families. I'm joining you from Pittsburgh in the United States, and I'll be joined by colleagues in the United Kingdom, in Canada, and by all of you. And we're so grateful that you are with us here today. So hello. As I noted, I am Gregg Behr. I'm the Executive Director of the Gregg Foundation here in Pittsburgh, and also the founder and chair of Remake Learning, a learning network about which I will speak later this morning. Our stars this morning come to you from Canada and also the United Kingdom. Annie Kidder from People for Education and Caireen Goddard from Big Change, both of whom will be joined by their colleagues, both of whom are named Eloise, Eloise Haylor and Eloise Tan. All of us will be discussing the work that we need to do, that we can do, that we might do to enlarge what we mean by learning, and how we bring everyone to bear in mobilizing a community, a place, a region, even a nation, in thinking about learning and learning outcomes for our young people. The good news is that we have some playbooks to follow. In fact, here in Pittsburgh, we have our own playbook for what we call the Remake Learning Network. And our colleagues in the United Kingdom and beyond have prepared playbooks for all of us around the world. At Big Change, they produced a publication last year called Reimagining Education Together. And Innovation Unit, together with WISE, produced a piece about local learning ecosystems and those models. Now, of course, in any presentation, there are too many features about what constitutes an amazing local ecosystem and how we achieve systematic change. So I want to be very clear here. We're not going to be able to dig into the 57 variables that it'll take for any place to do this work and to do it extraordinarily well. But we're going to give you 3 very clear, very concrete case examples. And as we do so, we're going to focus on certain features. Our colleagues at Big Change will talk about the importance of experimentation and trying things as we engage and invest in active learning on behalf of our young people. Our colleagues in Canada with People for Education will speak to their work broadly as well, but will also speak specifically to the role of young people and how youth have a voice in that work. And in the brief comments that I'll offer about Remake Learning, we'll endeavor to focus on the ways in which we engage parents, families, and caregivers. So again, we'll hear this morning from colleagues from Big Change, from People for Education, and from Remake Learning. But before we do so, we're going to start this morning with a poll. So if you might get yourselves ready. Our first question is this: to what extent do you agree with this statement? My place, and think of your place as your city, a region, a nation. My place needs to create a shared vision for the purpose of education. So please take a moment to complete this poll. And as I do so, let me say good morning to Caireen and to Annie. Welcome.
Hi, Gregg.
Good morning, Caireen. And I'm curious, because I don't want to bias our poll right now, but if we had asked this question of colleagues in the United Kingdom a year ago, 2 years ago, what's your sense as to what the poll results might reveal?
That's a great question, Gregg. I think in the UK, I would sense that there's probably a community, probably in the profession itself, probably amongst teachers and school leaders who would have said yes to that question, but probably more publicly that potentially no.
Yeah. It's incredible how this, how localized the question is, and when there are moments that it's more national or not. Annie, do you have a sense as to how that conversation has perhaps unfolded either in provinces or across the country of Canada?
Well, it's funny because I think it's really been affected by COVID. So, you know, if you ask that question right this very second, I think, you know, everybody, that there would be a range of purposes, but there would be agreement or a sudden kind of understanding of how incredibly important schools and education are to everybody. That kind of, it shone a light on that that maybe didn't exist before. So I think it's changed the conversation in a way.
So here are your poll results. So 20% strongly disagree, 20% neutral, 20% somewhat agree, and 40% strongly agree. So we've got almost 2/3 who either agree or strongly agree that we need this work. And in fact, a sizable minority who are either neutral or disagree. So let's see if we might see a change in those results later by the end of these 3 concrete presentations. And first, it is my pleasure to introduce Caireen Goddard from Big Change in London. Welcome, Caireen.
Thank you, Greg. I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah, thank you, Greg, for such a warm welcome and introduction. I'm delighted to be here as part of Rewired and to share the panel with you, Annie and Eloise, whose thinking and work we have been inspired by and continue to learn from. I'm going to start by saying a little bit about Big Change as an organisation, what we do, what we care about, and then share some detail about the initiative we're leading in the UK, which is a new kind of national co-mission on the purpose and future of education. Excuse me, sorry, I'm just move through my slides. So Big Change is a charity based in the UK. We were founded by Sam and Holly Branson, Princess Beatrice and 3 friends back in 2012. We support action on the ground now by backing the pioneers and projects that address systemic challenges to ensure that all young people are set up to thrive. And we also take a long-term view. My role is to lead the system change and network strategy in the UK and globally. And that's a strategy that has been informed massively by those pioneers who are so often find that their work and their impact is limited by system constraints. And has also been informed by the work of others in our global network who are really thinking hard and practically demonstrating how we transform education systems in their different contexts. At Big Change, we see ourselves as a catalyst, working with and through others who share our mission. And because we sit outside of the formal education system, as I said, we're able to take a really long-term, hopeful view of what's possible. Emerging from the crisis and in the midst of the uncertainty that we all face, there is a strategic choice to make, to focus solely on getting back to normal, or to take the opportunity to break with the past and reimagine what education could and should be for the future. In England, getting back to normal means reverting to a system with significant limitations, one that focuses too narrowly on academic outcomes, neglecting the wider attitudes, knowledge and skills that help young people reach their potential, confuses means with ends by prioritising performance in high-stakes exams over genuine learning and development, has improved test scores, but sees Britain's young people amongst the least happy and healthy in the world. So we choose to reimagine what's possible and to move into 2021 and beyond, pursuing the long-term system change that is so needed. A year ago, we published these 10 big hopes for change. They are our unashamedly hopeful take on the change we want to see. Hope number 1 is really the encapsulation of our approach to system change, which is centered around the thinking about levers for system transformation, which is driven by work undertaken by Donella Meadows and most recently adapted by Todd Rose from Harvard and the think tank Populous. That work emphasizes the significance of the cultural lever. So changing the purpose or goal of the system and shifting the public mindset towards an acceptance of that. And our big idea to delivering hope number one is a national commission, but not one that's driven by the traditional experts or by government, but by the people for whom education matters the most: young people, parents, educators, and employers. Over the last 10 years, there have been at least 9 commissions in the UK looking to tackle recognised problems in education, yet these problems remain and our education system is largely unchanged. What we have designed is a new kind of commission, what we are calling a co-mission, because it is not the preserve of the great and the good, but a genuinely shared endeavour for change. Through our scoping work, which included research undertaken by the think tank IPPR, we identified 4 key problems with traditional commissions that our model has explicitly set out to address. Rather than spend take time talking through the problems, I'll focus in on the design features that set out to turn them on their head. So in designing our model for the co-mission, we looked at initiatives from around the world and spoke to hundreds of experts in education and beyond. And these are the features of the commission that we've established. So the co-mission will privilege the perspectives and aspirations of young people, and especially those for whom the current education system in England works the least well. We will address the credibility problem by giving power to them and to parents, educators, and employers to feed into and shape the work and to make decisions. We will create an enabling coalition of diverse partners, formally bringing together the right combination of expertise and resources to pull it off, but also explicitly connecting with and looking to build sufficient alignment with other agendas, campaigns, and organisations. We will focus strategic comms capacity and resources on powerful messaging, storytelling, and campaigns that build momentum over time, as well as receptiveness to the ideas and the outcomes of this work. And potentially most importantly, speaking to experimentation, we won't just talk about change. As insights and ideas grow out of the co-mission's work, as it looks at evidence and insights from theory and practice, investment will be made in testing and scaling new learning opportunities and designing the new system conditions and structures that are required for long-term change to take hold. This strand of work will take a portfolio approach, and we've been really inspired by the work that RewirEd have been doing with Radical on their provocations for experimentation. We want to support individuals, schools, and communities to deliver change in their localities, to work with cities and regions across England to take a place-based approach, and to work with key partners to redesign at the national level, looking at, for example, our assessment and accountability systems. So this is the model. You almost certainly can't see the detail. This is the visual that we put up to show people that we've given this some serious thought. Needless to say, we see this co-mission as an ambitious system intervention, which applies those design principles as I've described. It has 3 key phases, which look completely linear in this model, but definitely are not as simple as that in implementation. And the model is very much a starting point. We are building out the detail of the specific activity and programs of work as we speak. And phase 1, which kicks off in January next year, is also a phase in which we'll be doing a lot of design work with young people themselves and other partners. And we plan to launch the co-mission publicly in the summer next year. So in summary, what will this co-mission be and do? The commission will be a national platform for hopeful conversation, insight, and action. It will ask and answer the big questions that the public cares about, give young people the power to influence and make change, establish a new purpose for education, and shape a hopeful vision for the future. And it will learn from and invest in powerful new solutions. So finally, we are really keen to hear from other national or regional initiatives around the world similar to the co-mission. So please do get in touch if you are involved in or know of any. And I think I'm modelling good timekeeping, so I'm going to finish there and hopefully be able to answer any questions that you might have later on.
So,
back to you, Gregg.
Hello. So those of you who are just joining us, I'm Gregg Behr. I'm privileged to be your moderator for this session. I'm joining you from Pittsburgh. I am the founder and co-chair of a learning network called Remake Learning. We've just heard from Caireen Goddard from Big Change, and I want to invite everyone to ask questions using the chat function. I've got my Post-it notes and my Sharpie here. I've been writing questions myself, and we're going to ask questions throughout, and then we'll have questions and answers later. Caireen, if I can just ask you a few questions that your presentation sparked for me. So you mentioned the 10 or 12 big hopes for change in education that you all announced last year. And I have reason to know that there was a public campaign around that. So what was the public response to those big hopes for education? Obviously, it's been a tumultuous time in politics and society and otherwise in the UK. How did the public respond to these hopeful messages about what's possible in education?
It's a great question. It was to a degree a public campaign. It was also as much really a positioning piece for us as an organisation to reach out to other potential allies, unusual suspects out there who organisations, people leading other agendas who recognised themselves in these hopes and wanted to reach out and work with us on it. And actually, some of the partnerships that we've established around the coalition moving forward came from the public sort of publication of these hopes and that reaching out. The timing that we chose actually was quite interesting. We launched these hopes at the same time as the launch of the PISA results in December 2019. And we did that fairly consciously because at the same time we were also working with media partners and journalists and colleagues at OECD to try and influence the coverage that we might get in England around the PISA results, and looking to broaden that out from being only about some of the the headlines that we normally get in terms of country comparisons, and digging in into a bit more detail around some of the data that, as I said, was exposing some of the limitations of the system. And to that degree, we were reasonably successful, I would say.
Yeah. Caireen, I'm going to paraphrase what you said. You said that we're going to privilege young people and those for whom the education system has not worked or not worked well. Have you had any pushback about granting privilege in that way?
No, we haven't. And in fact, I mean, we at this stage, this is not a public initiative. So, I mean, we're talking about this pretty publicly here, but this is not an initiative that has had a kind of official public launch in the UK at this point. We'll be doing that later next year because we really wanted to choose the right moment. And I agree with you, Annie, that the moment has come for sure. I know we're going to come on to this later, but we've got some recent data that is really showing that teachers and parents in the UK really do believe that now is the time for long-term change in education. No, we haven't had any pushback, and if anything, the funders and partners that we're talking to right now are absolutely committed to the social justice dimension of this work. And we've been pursuing a kind of social mobility agenda in the UK, a kind of closing the attainment gap agenda in the UK for a long time, and this is looking to do something really different. We're essentially saying, if we can design the system to work for the young people who are least served by the system that we have now, then everyone will benefit, and I genuinely believe that.
I have more questions for you, but I'll hold those for later. And let me just invite everyone, use the chat function as your Post-it and your Sharpie. Please send along questions throughout. I'll either integrate them as we go along, or we'll take them at the question and answer portion toward the end of the session. Now I have the honor of moving us north to Canada and to my colleagues, Annie and Eloise, who in part will speak about young people, youth engagement and youth agency. And they'll do so in talking about the extraordinary work that they're doing with People for Education. So Annie, turning it over to you. And Annie, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Perhaps Eloise, are you able to? join us?
Yes, I am. I think she's trying to call. Okay. Oh, her screen is frozen. Okay.
Well, welcome, Eloise. Thank you for the remarkable flexibility. Let's turn to you, if we may.
Yeah, I'm just going to get our screen in presentation view. Thank you very much for your patience as we navigate this.
As you pull that up, Caireen, can I ask you just one last question?
Yep.
So, Caireen, you mentioned 9 commissions to date in the UK. So this will be the 10th one.
Yeah, I think there are probably even more. I think there were even more than that, to be honest.
Yeah, so you have big hopes. So what will distinguish this one in your planning? What's going to distinguish this one from the previous others?
It's a question we get asked a lot, Greg, and I suppose one of the challenges, people in the UK, I don't actually know the degree to which commissions are a kind of formal thing in other parts of the world, but they certainly have a kind of place in the UK sort of policy making kind of world, and so people are quite familiar with them, and they tend to have very important people on them who have lots of experience and expertise in formal roles, and then they tend to make policy recommendations. And the degree to which the current government is aligned with those obviously has a significant impact on the degree to which they're taken up. So the question we often get asked is how are you going to shift policy? And our response to that question is always actually yes, that shifting policy is clearly part of our agenda. But what we're really trying to do is to create the conditions in which whichever government happens to be in position at the time is forced to make policy change, because actually there has been a kind of shift in the public demand for a system which is delivering something fundamentally different and which is oriented around a different set of goals and a different set of outcomes. So we're definitely, our differentiator is that we are working with the public, with young people, parents, employers and teachers to create those conditions in which the people who make policy have to follow.
Thank you, Caireen. So Eloise,
I am back. If you can hear me, I'm here.
Great. Welcome, Annie.
Technology, it's a fabulous thing. I just have to put my slides up, which are there now, as long as you can still hear me. I'm so sorry. Okay, if I share my screen, oh, is that all right? I think Eloise was already sharing her screen.
Just go ahead, Annie.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm not sure how much you've actually introduced us, but I am Annie Kidder. I am the Executive Director of People for Education. And we are a non-governmental organization working in Canada, basically to change the future of public education. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're doing, and then Eloise Tan, our research director, will go into dig deeper into some of the details. We work with a wide range of partners and stakeholders. It's so interesting listening to the big change presentation to hear where we're the same and where we're different. And I think that one of the things that's particular about People for Education is that we sort of work from the outside in. We think about what kind of world or country, province, community do we want to live in, and what's the role of public education in getting us there. And our focus is on public education. And I think there's widespread agreement in the world. You could hear it from Caireen, that we need new generations who have a range of transferable skills and global competencies that will allow them to adapt and innovate, imagine, solve complex problems, think critically, be able to collaborate, take what they've learned in one area and apply it to another, and especially to continue to learn. This is incredibly important in this rapidly changing world. We need new generations with a sense of agency that will allow them to participate equitably equitably in the society around them. And we definitely need to address the growing gaps, both economic and social, that we have in our society to overcome systemic racism and the impact of colonization that we're feeling in a lot of our world. And last but not least, we need new generations who will be able to work in jobs that we haven't even imagined yet, and thus the need for that wide range of skills. Now, if we think about public education's role in getting us there, it is possible for great, strong education systems to accomplish those things or give us those next generations we need. But there are a number of barriers, and there again, it's interesting that how much we see similar barriers, that currently students aren't sufficiently, and most importantly, not equitably prepared to thrive in today's world or in the future. Race, demographics are still all the main predictors of success for young people in school and in their lives. And that there are jurisdictional barriers. That's where big change work is interesting too, that there are jurisdictional barriers in terms of systems, but also even education itself tends to live and work in a kind of its own little silo. It's not very good at working with the world around it. And despite all of our countries having signed on to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular goal number 4, which is a right to a quality education, we haven't defined that right, or what quality education is, and that right is definitely not experienced equitably. So, like big change, we have also launched an initiative to support change. We're doing all the normal things. I'm kind of envious of the co-mission idea, and we may steal that too, but we are consulting, we're fostering networks, we're working very closely with students, which Eloise will talk about more. We have a system of working tables where we bring experts together to dive deeply, looking at problems. We are conducting research ourselves and looking at others' research and communicating, because it's incredibly important that this is a public conversation. And our goal, like big change, is that idea of by producing evidence, developing policy-ready ideas, engaging people across sectors, and in particular by building that dialogue with the public, that we will build a movement for educational change. And that ultimately that movement will foster education systems that are less stuck, that are willing and able and supported through effective policy and public demand, which is an incredibly important part of this, the cultural lever that Caireen talked about, that they will be supported to evolve and change. So that's one goal. Another one is that sociodemographics will no longer be determinants of a student's success. This is an age-old problem. It must change. It's part of the stuckness of education. And I think that, overall, that the public connects the dots between the health and strength of the education system and our capacity to have a fair, prosperous, and sustainable society. So that's the big picture. I'm going to turn it over to Eloise to talk about particular work we're doing in those areas.
Thank you, Annie. And can you continue to share that?
Yes, I can. So these
Wonderful.
are all, I don't know if you're going to talk to this one, but this is specifically what we're working on. Do you want me to just go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there we go.
So thanks everyone for joining us today. I am going to share with you 3 different pieces of our work that we're very excited to spotlight today. You'll see there on your screen a collection of quotes. These are quotes that came from youth when we hosted a youth-centered event on March, 5 days before the pandemic hit, and we brought together youth from across Canada, from diverse backgrounds, different language backgrounds, so French and English, given that we're in Canada, Indigenous youth, racialized youth, youth that don't see themselves in typical leadership spaces, youth that do see themselves as leaders, all kinds of youth together for a week to talk about what they saw as the future of public education. So we brought them there to listen to them, to hear what they had to say about education, and so that they could listen to each other. So you'll see there some of their thoughts. They worked together to distill their discussions into 11 recommendations for policymakers, which are available in a report that we're happy to share through channels afterwards on our talk. And we continue to work with youth, and some of the very same youth that came to that event in March. And some of those youth have even gone on to join us as co-facilitators for other focus groups that we do with other youth across Canada to talk about the very same issue of what is the future of public education as defined and designed by youth. So we're really trying to build a model of youth engagement where we center youth, we privilege youth, and we capacity build along the way and build them into a system of so that they are decision makers at the table as well. The next piece of work that I'll be sharing with you today is, we call it the continuum of learning. So what do we mean by the continuum of learning? Well, we know, at least in our context in Canada, that the different periods of education for a student are separated. They exist in these silos. We have early childhood, we have K to 12, and we have post-secondary, being the college, university sector. And researchers, educators, policymakers in each of these three different areas, they pretty much exist separate from each other. They don't often speak to each other. They definitely aren't doing enough work building bridges and transitions between their different silos. So while we have these artificially created divisions or silos between these stages of education, we lose sight of the fact that it's a student, it's one student that is transitioning through these stages of education. And oftentimes these transitions are not seamless for them. It's not seamless for their parents. They have to, at each stage, make sense of a new system that's using new languages with new places to go for help and new faces around them. And unfortunately, the students that need support the most are often the students that are falling through the cracks during these transitions. So to that end, we've begun a research project to identify best practices and policy-ready ideas that can address this broken continuum of learning, because indeed we found in our preliminary research with stakeholders that the continuum is broken. So this year, we have begun by interviewing key leaders in each field. And we are very excited about where this work takes us in the future, because what we found as preliminary results is that leaders in each of these fields, there is a great appetite to work and build across this continuum of learning to better support students at the core. The last piece of work that I'm very excited to share with you today, this is like a whirlwind, but please visit our website if you'd like to dive deeper into any of this, is called the Right to Education Framework. Annie mentioned Sustainable Development Goal 4, the right to quality education. So we all know that youth have a right to quality education. This project asks the question, what does a quality education look like? How do we know that the state is meeting that right to education? How can we see where we're making progress in the right to quality education? How can we identify gaps in the right to education? So the past 2 years, we have been working with researchers, students, policymakers, legal experts, legal scholars, to develop a draft framework that articulates what the right to quality education looks like in Canada. We're at a very, very exciting moment in this phase of the project. We are now having public consultations across Canada. We're inviting anyone and everyone, youth, teachers, families, policymakers, civil society, to share with us their feedback, their suggestions, their comments on the framework, how they might mobilize it within their community. If we are missing a perspective, if there's something they would like us to consider to add, and we're working towards articulating this right to education framework so that we can have clear indicators that will help us identify progress and identify gaps within the Canadian context. And again, before I turn it over to Annie, that is work that we're doing in partnership with youth. So we have youth facilitators co-designing consultations for other youth. So it's a really beautiful cyclical process where we're seeing youth integrated into many steps of our design system. And that consultation framework is available on our website. And I invite all of you to take a look at it and get back to us if you have insights.
One brief question for you, Eloise, and for Annie. Are young people ready to engage?
I can think. So we talk a lot about readiness to engage. I will point out that it's not just young people that have to be ready to engage. Readiness has to exist on both sides of the relationship. So the organization, People for Education, we had to get ready. So we took steps ourselves to make sure we were ready to engage, that we could create a space for that youth engagement. We took very practical steps. We reached out to an expert student-led organization that helps organizations to engage with youth, the Students' Commission of Canada. They've helped us make ourselves and improve ourselves to be ready. The young people that we're working with, we do start from a capacity building approach. So we're not throwing them in the deep end, so to speak. We're meeting them where they are. We're acknowledging that they come with assets, that they come with experience, but also that there are pieces of the way we do work that may not resonate with them. So we're trying to create spaces where both sides of the relationship are ready. And it's definitely a learning experience. And we have a lot to learn from others on the call and the folks that are joining us here today.
Great, we have just a brief time left. So I'm going to jump if I may, I'll jump to a presentation about Remake Learning, and then we can finish maybe with some questions. So thank you, Annie and Eloise. So very briefly, Remake Learning, just to the south of Toronto in the region of southwestern Pennsylvania. Remake Learning is a learning network. You can connect with us on your favorite social platform or at remakelearning.org. You'll find plenty of documentation and reports. So what is Remake Learning? Remake Learning is a regional network that we describe as igniting engaging, relevant, and equitable learning practices for these very young people about whom we've been speaking, who are navigating, as we all know, incredibly rapid social and technological change. It's a nearly 15-year network involving more than 600 schools, museums, libraries, other sites of learning, more than $100 million in private dollars invested alongside public support for public education in and out of school, always focused on our young people, learners at the center. And in fact, educators in and out of school, early childhood through high school, have developed a profile of what it is that we want for learners, the types of knowledge, skills, and dispositions that our colleague Annie described a moment ago. It's a network that supports the adults to which Eloise just referred and prepares those adults differently through catalytic grants, through support for storytelling, professional development, and learning. And it's a network that's very much focused on the adults, the caring adults in children's lives. And we realized a number of years ago that we need to focus squarely on parents, to help parents, families, and caregivers understand what the purpose of education might be and how it's changing fundamentally. And Caireen, to your note a moment ago about polling among parents and families in the United Kingdom, similarly here in the United States, the National Parents Union has conducted polling of parents. And in fact, 6 in 10 parents, and a slightly growing number, think that this is a moment to rethink education and what happens in our schools and other sites of learning on the other side of our pandemic. Locally, 5 years ago, we launched something called Remake Learning Days. Think of Remake Learning Days as a remarkable festival that engages parents, families, and caregivers in the learning that's happening in our region, that connects what's timeless and classic about learning with new ways of learning that we see played out through technology-enhanced learning, STEM and STEAM learning, and all sorts of new ways of learning. The idea is to help parents understand how learning is being remade, to support them in supporting the passions and interests that their young people have, so that if a young person is lit up by coding or maker-centered learning or arts-based education, that they begin to appreciate their place, their region as a campus for learning. And it's ultimately about powering their child's future and starting to demand these new systemic changes in their schools, in their libraries, in the museums. It's work that's taken root not only here in southwestern Pennsylvania, but in 16 states, regions, and cities across the United States. And later this year, next year rather, these 16 sites will play host to Remake Learning Days across America. In fact, that work launched just 1 month ago. If I may, because we're coming to a closing time, I want to ask everyone if you have any final questions or comments. But Caireen and Annie, as you've listened to one another, are there questions that you have of one another that you feel like we need to surface for ourselves and for our audience today?
Well, I have a question that has to do with, there's a lot of politics in education on the outside, there's a lot of politics on education in the inside. So I'm wondering from Caireen and from you, Gregg, how you're addressing that. So sometimes there's a kind of defensiveness in the system. There are a lot of different players, everybody has turf, everybody owns different parts. So when you're approaching your work, and sometimes there's a tendency when people come in and go, we need change, for people to feel attacked who are working in the system, teachers federations, organizations in the system. For you in the UK, what's been your experience about with that?
It's a great question. I'm going to be really quick because I know we don't have very long. So, I mean, the main thing that we're doing, and because we're prioritizing those sort of public audiences, which includes teachers, is that we are investing time and energy in the first part of next year and across the Commission's work into really thinking about how we frame this in a way which is really going to resonate. So we're hoping to undertake work with the Frameworks Institute we're entering a partnership with Brookings, looking at how we can use insight from social media to understand how the public are thinking and talking about education, so that we can talk about the work in ways that really have meaning and resonate with them. And frankly, our working assumption is that will get us past the traditional divides in education, because we'll be talking a language that the public understands and cares about, rather than a professional or sector-driven language.
And Caireen, that story is so critical. So as we close today's session, let me encourage you all, look at hashtag New Education Story, look at hashtag Remake Tomorrow. So much of this is about changing the storyline and the place to which we might go in the places which we're privileged to reside. I mentioned that there are too many variables at the beginning of this presentation. That's certainly true in this hour that we've had together. To my colleagues at Big Change and to my colleagues at People for Education, thank you. It's been a privilege and honor for all of us to be part of RewirEdX. Thank you, everyone, and have a great end to your day.